Shabbat Shalom Yasharallah. Welcome to week 29, covering Leviticus chapter 11 through 15, which we're going to be starting off with the food law, the clean and unclean animal list. Very excited to do so. Let's get started with a prayer so we can get going. Heavenly Abba, Tawara, Shabbat Shalom for all that you do and all that you are that goes unseen by us, Heavenly Abba. That you may bestow upon us eyes to see and ears to hear and a ruach of wisdom and understanding. That you teach us, you be our teacher, you be our leader, you be our light in this dark realm. Show mercy upon us all, Abba, through this hardships we may encounter. If we make mistakes, please have mercy upon us, show grace, and give us an opportunity to make correction. Please give us divine counsel when we're doing this live reading, that we may take in and grow and glean from all that we read today and throughout this week. Barak Yoneh Bahashem Yeshaya, we pray. Amen and amen. All right. Without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 11.
Leviticus 11. The Lord spoke again to Moses and Aaron, telling them, "Say to the Israelites, of all the beasts of the earth, these ones you may eat. You may eat any animal that has a split hoof, completely divided, and that chews the cud. But of those that only chew the cud, or only have a divided hoof, you are not to eat the following. The camel, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is unclean for you. The rock badger, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is unclean for you. The rabbit, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is unclean for you. And the pig, though it has a split hoof, completely divided, does not chew the cud. It is unclean for you. You must not eat their meat or touch their carcasses. They are unclean for you."
All right. First pause right there at verse 8. So verse 1 through 8 is the land animals, the basic instructions for the clean and unclean land animals. And it gives us two basic instructions here: split hoof and choose the cud. It has to do both. And then it gives some examples of animals that may do one but not do both. It has to do both to be a clean animal. And so let's get some images here, especially if this is your first time doing the animal clean and unclean lists. It helps with visuals, because if you don't grow up on a farm or around these animals, you're not sure what you're reading. So we have the split hooves, or they have cloven feet. So these that are not split, any animal that doesn't have a split hoof is unclean. But if an animal has a split hoof, as all of these are, that doesn't make them clean outright. They also have to chew the cud. And as we go and label some of these, see, it mentions how a pig has a split hoof, which means this bottom area here, the hoof part, is completely separate, as we read right here in verse 7. And the pig, though it has a split hoof completely divided, does not chew the cud. So just because it has a split hoof alone doesn't make it clean. But then other clean animals, though, We see goats. Goats have completely split. Camels, as one of the examples as well, that it chews the cud, but it does not has a completely split hoof, as it said in verse 4. Though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. Right? And then we see the cow with a completely divided hoof. And so that's the first half. We have two major descriptions. We have the divided hoof, and then we have chew the cud. So what is chew the cud, right? I remember the first time I read it, I just was like, okay, what is that? Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. Chew the cud. Ruminant animal. That's pretty much cattle. Further chew partly digested food. That's what that is. They chew partly digested food. And they scrape the throat, they bring it back up, partly digested food, and then they chew it again. That is the cud, is the partly digested food. To chew the cud is they scrape the throat, it comes back up, they chew it, and then we see the ruminant type of cattle, deer, sheep, goats, antelope. All of these are clean animals. Now, not all animals that chew the cud, like a camel, is clean, but those that chew the cud with the split hoof, which is pretty much all of these listed, to go up a sin. And continuing, yeah, just more understanding on the type of animals that do this. All right, and I also wanted to make reference to the Targums, just because the way they translated it. Onkelos, though, gonna be looking at different Targums today. We have the Jonathan, and then we have Onkelos. So I'm looking at Onkelos right now, and how it talks about the cud. Verse 3, chapter 11. This is Leviticus 11, the same thing we just read. Verse 3, the hooves are completely split, and that also chews its cud, brings up dissolved food among animals. So just they give us a little description on what cud means, which I appreciate. And as it says here, just expounding more on it. However, these in particular, you may not eat of those that chew, bring up their cud dissolved food. And then it just goes on to keep making those references so you understand, because most people don't understand that. At least initially, if you've never seen it before. All right, so wrapping this up, this first segment, verse 1 through 8 of land animal clean and unclean rules, is that they have to have a split hoof, or as they say, cloven hooves, with chewing the cud. Both of those means it's a clean land animal. And here is a quick list, a snapshot. You can find this on my website, becomesetapart.com. But here's a quick list of clean and unclean according to these standards given to us in the rule book. All right, continuing now. Verse 9.
Of all the creatures that live in the water, whether in the seas or in the streams, you may eat anything with fins and scales. But the following among all the teeming life and creatures in the water are detestable to you. Everything in the seas or streams that does not have fins and scales, they shall be an abomination to you. You must not eat their meat, and you must detest their carcasses. Everything in the water that does not have fins and scales shall be detestable to you.
Okay, so very straightforward. Fins and scales. as we were given before, they don't give us any bulk description of animals like in the first one, but they give us the two rules. So, two straightforward rules. What makes a fish clean or unclean? It needs to have scales. And some fish may have micro scales, but if it has scales, it has scales. If you can prove it has scales, if you can visually see it has scales, even if it's small, it has scales, period. I see arguments like, oh, well, what if you can barely see it? If you can prove it has scales, then it has scales. Keep it simple, guys. If it has it, it has it. And then the obvious ones is fins. Fins are more obvious to see than scales all the time. So if it has those two, they are clean. If it doesn't have both of them, just like with the land animal, it needed to have both a split divided hoof and chewed cud to be clean. Same thing with the fish. If it has fins and scales, it is clean. So that being said, here's a snapshot that, like I said, you don't have to go crazy trying to take a screenshot of it. You can find it elsewhere on becomesetapart.com, or which we're going to get to, but I'll already plug it in here. I have an individual study that goes more in depth than what I'm doing in this, because this isn't a food law study. This is a Torah portion. So I have a full law study that talks just more in depth of everything we're talking about in Leviticus 11, to find that on my YouTube as well. But here is a quick list of clean fish and unclean sea creatures, which we know shellfish is a big no-no, which is probably the biggest part of the sea life creatures we worry about is the shellfish, the crab, crawfish, lobster, oysters, shrimp. Those is what you see the most that are unclean that we have to dodge. You don't really see people eating, well, catfish, maybe some fish eggs, right? Caviar, right? But other ones, you don't see people eating dolphins and whales and other things like that. It's usually the shellfish with a couple of other fish in there. All right, let's keep it moving. Verse 13. So we did land animals, verse 1 through 8, sea animals, 9 through 12. And now we're going over the fowls of the air, 13 through 19, right here.
Additionally, you are to detest the following birds, and they must not be eaten because they are detestable: the eagle, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, any kind of falcon, any kind of raven, the ostrich, the screech owl, the gull, any kind of hawk, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the white owl, the desert owl, the osprey, the stork, any kind of heron, the hoopoe, and the bat.
All right. So, interestingly enough, we just read about the sea creatures, and it didn't give us any examples. It just gives us the rubric, right? Of what is good, what makes it good, what makes it clean and unclean. Fish is the fish has scales and fins. But then we get to, in verse 13, we get to the birds, and it doesn't give us any rules. It just gives us examples. So I'm going to use the Aramaic Targums here to help us with the rules for the birds. And we're going to use these examples. And we majority of these examples is in under one category. So let's go to the Targum Jonathan, Leviticus 11. I am going to, oh, excuse me. Let me pause real quick. I forgot to make reference. I just wanted to make reference of Deuteronomy 14. Deuteronomy 14 is the chapter of the second witness for Leviticus 11. I didn't wasn't really reading them because I'm not really going to read them because I'm just have them referenced here as a witness verse. So just real quick, I wanted to stop before I continued with the birds and just catch up. Deuteronomy 14, 3 through 6 is the land animals in Leviticus 11, 1 through 8. Okay, if you want to make note. So that's the land animals, and then it gives examples: ox, sheep, goat, deer, gazelle, etc. And then just reconfirms what we just read. Parse the hoof and choose the cud. You may eat. And then Deuteronomy 14, 9 through 10 is the sea animals, which just reiterates whatever has fins and scales you may eat. Deuteronomy 14, 9, and 10. And we are now on the birds, which is Deuteronomy 14, 11 through 18. So I'll just read this since I'm here. You may eat all clean birds, but these are the ones that you should not eat. So same thing. It doesn't give us the structure of what makes an animal clean or a bird clean or unclean, like the rules. It just gives us examples, and it does the same thing, and it gives us all these different examples of birds that are unclean, but it doesn't really give us much clean examples or rules that makes a bird clean. And so that's where we're at now. Okay. So now we're caught up with the reference in Deuteronomy 14. Let's go to the Targums, Jonathan, chapter 11 of Leviticus. Oh, excuse me. We're going to chapter 14, Deuteronomy 14 of the Targum Jonathan. Okay. And I'm going to read verse 11. All right. Sorry, we bouncing around everywhere here. Okay. So for Leviticus 11, 13 through 19, for the birds is where we're at. We're going to reference, like I said, Deuteronomy 14, but we're going to do it in the Targums to help with this rule, to get a structure on what makes birds clean or unclean. Verse 11 reads, every bird which has a vesicle or crop, which may be picked away, in which a bird is longer than a finger and not a rapacious kind, you may eat. The two ones I'm going to focus on that I can get scriptural witnesses is the rapacious, which is a bird of prey. So they live by hunting. That's their main source of food is rapacious. That is a bird of prey. Just want to make that clear. And that's what the majority of these examples are. The eagle, the vulture, the hawk, the owl. A lot of these are birds of prey. And then they have to have a crop. So we get the bird of prey, we literally have the examples right here. So it makes it very clear that birds of prey are unclean, rapacious. And then we have that they have to have a crop. Focus on that word crop because we can prove that clean birds do have a crop, not just here in the Targums, but in the Bible itself. So we go to Leviticus chapter 1 when they are performing the sacrifices and teaching the priests how to do the bird sacrifices. If his offering to the Most High is a burnt offering of birds, then he shall bring his offering of turtle doves or pigeons, and the priest shall bring it to the altar and wring off its head and burn it on the altar. Its blood shall be drained out on the side of the altar. He shall remove its crop with its contents and cast it aside the altar on the east side in the places of four ashes. So we see right here that the birds sacrifice, a part of the ritual of a bird sacrifice is removing the crop. So Deuteronomy 14:11 in the Targum says, not a bird of prey, and it needs to have a crop. Those are the two things we're going to use because those are the two things we have reference for. The longer than a finger, I mean, we there. You could take it, but there's not. I'm just saying these are the two we actually have references, and we can see that it clearly is pointing to the birds of prey of all the animals we shouldn't eat. And then we see that in Leviticus with the bird sacrifices, a part of the bird sacrifices is ripping away the crop. So what is a crop? This is another animal term that you wouldn't know unless you dealt with these type of animals. So let's go over crop. As we see here, a crop, and you can literally see it on a chicken. It bulges out from a chicken. So you can see it bulge out from the chest of the chicken. Quite literally, easily could be taken away, as it says, to cut it out, to wring off the head, and to take away the crop of the contents, because this is where the food goes before it goes into the full digestion of the bird. And we see the same thing with a turkey here. This is the anatomy of the turkey. So we see it in chickens, in turkeys, and it's a part of a clean animal or a clean bird specifically. And let me see, what's this next one here? Oh, no. This is just the definition, but I'll reload the page real quick. So we have the two rules is the has to have a crop and rapacious, living by preying on other animals, especially by catching living prey. So that's how these birds make a living for their what they do on a regular basis. Like they fly around just looking for animals, as we see eagles and hawks. That's what they do. So clearly stated now, we see the example of the birds having needing a crop and that they're not birds of prey. So all that being said, I wanted to go into some more examples here. Or is that it right now? Okay. We're going into the list. So, like I said, I am not going to do a full-blown animal clean and unclean list one by one. That's for the food law study. I see a couple talking about chicken in the chat. I discussed this in the food law study. A chicken is not a bird of prey. A chicken, as we just looked at, has a crop. There's no attribute of a chicken that makes it unclean. There is a lot of teachings out there that does not use any type of reference to label a chicken unclean. They say things like, oh, well, an animal can eat like a live mouse. It's not a bird of prey. It's an opportunist. Totally different. The majority of a chicken's diet is insects, plants, etc., not live animals. It's not a bird of prey, as we just read. That, if anything, a chicken is the prey. A chicken is the prey of everything. And there's much more things that I go over, but that's not what this study is. This is a Torah portion, and we're going line by line, and we're going to stay line by line. And if you want more than line by line and you want an animal clean list study, then go to the food law. Okay. But here is our list in a snapshot. Give you a little second to look at it before we continue. All right, let's continue now. All right, verse 20 through 23 will be insects.
All flying insects that walk on all fours are detestable to you. However, you may eat the following kinds of flying insects that walk on all fours: those having jointed legs above their feet for hopping on the ground. Of these you may eat any kind of locust, katydid, cricket, or grasshopper. All other flying insects that have 4 legs are detestable to you.
So that's it. Insects. Very straightforward. Clean, locusts, crickets, grasshoppers, any ones that fly but can jump and have jointed legs is clean. And all other insects, the crawly ones, the sliver ones, the ones that fly but don't jump, all the other ones are unclean. Remember, John the Baptist was making a living off these insects. They got to be. And remember the locusts in the plagues of Egypt. They were excited. They were salting those locusts during that plague for a moment at least. So I mean, man, we're not accustomed to eating them, but sounds like they might not be half bad. And once again, you can find all of this in the food law study on my YouTube. All right. Now, the remainder of the chapter is going to summarize and give more examples of the animals in the clean and unclean that we just reviewed in the 4 big categories: land animals, sea, the air, and crawly insects.
These creatures will make you unclean. Whoever touches their carcasses will be unclean until evening.
Oh, 1 second. Got to remember to read my other verses here. Let's go to Deuteronomy 14:19 and the Targums here. I wanted to make a note here. On the Targums, Jonathan, Deuteronomy 14, it talks about the insects and all flies, and it talks about bees and wasps and all worms of vegetables and posts which come away from materials of food, fly as birds, are unclean to you. They may not be eaten. So it expounds more on the different type of animals. And honestly, every translation can have different animals translated from the manuscript, but 1 second, let me see here. One second. Is it this translation? Oh, here it is. Look, it's Leviticus 11. Leviticus 11:20 was the verse I meant to read about the bees. Talks about the bee species shall be abominable to you. Nevertheless, of honey of the bee you may eat. So just wanted to point that out. We're talking about the flying animals, flying insects, And the bee obviously is a part of one of those flying insects that doesn't have joint legs that jump. So bees we shall not eat. But specifically in the Jonathan Targums, it does give us you can have the honey, even though throughout the rest of the text is clear that they were eating honey and they knew how it tasted, right? So just have the reference of Deuteronomy 14:19 for the clean, unclean winged animals, insects. But Leviticus 11:21. Yes, that's what we just read. But continuing here, Genesis 43:11. Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry a present down to the man, a little balm and a little honey." That's the main thing I want to point out, is that they were obviously consuming honey. This is from Jacob. And then once again in Exodus 16:31, now the house of Yasharallah called its name manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Why would this be a description if they didn't know what honey was going to be, or the reader wouldn't be allowed to eat honey, right? And we'll just stop there, but just another reference example of the food law in context permitted throughout the text. Okay. I got so many notes here, just trying to keep track of it. My bad for going back and forth a little bit. All right, so now verse 24.
And whoever picks up one of their carcasses must wash his clothes, and he will be unclean until evening.
So, touching an unclean animal, a dead unclean animal, is unclean. You'll be unclean until evening.
Every animal with hooves not completely divided, or that does not chew the cud, is unclean for you. Whoever touches any of them will be unclean. All the four-footed animals that walk on their paws are unclean for you. Whoever touches their carcasses will be unclean until evening.
So just expounding on the land animals now. It didn't bring up the paw animals in the verses 1-8. So it's expounding on the land animals, saying, I didn't say paws, but obviously anything with paws would be unclean, because I told you the two things that make land animals clean: a cloven foot, a split hooves, and chews the cud. But they're just expounding on it. So lions, cats, dogs, walks on fours with paws, all unclean.
And anyone who picks up a carcass must wash his clothes, and he will be unclean until evening. They are unclean for you. The following creatures that move along the ground are unclean for you: the mole, the mouse, any kind of great lizard, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the common lizard, the skink, and the chameleon. These animals are unclean for you among all the crawling creatures. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until evening. When one of them dies and falls on something, that article becomes unclean. Any article of wood, clothing, leather, sackcloth, or any implement used for work must be rinsed with water and will remain unclean until evening. Then it will be clean. If any of them falls into a clay pot, everything in it will be unclean. You must break the pot. Any food coming into contact with water from that pot will be unclean, and any drink in such a container will be unclean. Anything upon which one of their carcasses falls will be unclean. If it is an oven or cooking pot, it must be smashed. It is unclean and will remain unclean for you. Nevertheless, a spring or cistern containing water will remain clean, but one who touches a carcass in it will be unclean. If a carcass falls on any seed for sowing, the seed is clean. But if water has been put on the seed and a carcass falls on it, It is unclean for you.
And so all these details, obviously, if you're in a land that we're going to go over, a land that the Most High is present and you're trying to keep things holy and clean that is around your homes, it adds that attention to detail. I mean, you could find a dead lizard, right? A dead lizard in some of your food. You would have to throw that out. Or, like I said, is in a vessel, or, these are just the details that would make that much more important if you were in the situation that they are in. But I mean, also for us, obviously, discard something if you find something dead and unclean in it. It's not worth keeping. Let's continue reading.
If an animal that you may eat dies, anyone who touches the carcass will be unclean until evening. Whoever eats from the carcass must wash his clothes and will be unclean until evening. And anyone who picks up the carcass must wash his clothes and will be unclean until evening.
Okay, let's put the verse 39 and 40 in context. It says, if an animal that you may eat, so a clean animal, dies, anyone that touches the carcass will be unclean until evening. Whoever eats from the carcass must wash his clothes and will be unclean until evening. This is not, so that means, without the context of how the animal dies, you're probably could be thinking, wait a minute, I'm unclean even if I eat a clean animal. The thing that is not, for whatever reason in this verse, it isn't specifically stating, is that the animal dies of itself, meaning you don't slaughter the animal yourself. If you slaughter a clean animal to eat it, you're not going to be unclean to eat it. Your clothes won't be unclean to eat it. If an animal that you may eat dies of itself, and it talks about this multiple times. We see it later in Leviticus 17:15. And every person who eats what dies of itself, or what is torn by a beast, whether he is a native or a sojourner, shall wash his clothes, what we just read. It will make your clothes unclean, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until evening. Then he shall be clean. So this is exactly what they're speaking of. It just doesn't say it in this fashion. And once again, one more example, Deuteronomy 14:21. You shall not eat anything that has died naturally. You may give it to the sojourner who is within your towns, that he may eat it. So what is unclean to you, if it is unclean to someone outside of the law that doesn't keep the laws of Moses, the law of the Most High, then give it to him. He's saying you can give it to somebody else, but it is unclean to you. You may give it to him to eat, and you may sell it to a foreigner. For you are a holy people, so you do not eat what is unclean. I speak on that because the example that I give to for the times of the Passover, where you're taking out all the leaven from your homes, and people go, "Oh well, I don't know. I feel awkward giving it to somebody else, even if they don't keep it, because they're going to have leaven during unleavened bread." No, give it to a foreigner. Give it to a sojourner, someone that doesn't keep it. If they are not choosing to be a part of the holy people of the Most High by keeping Passover, there's no blood on your hands. It's okay to give something that would be unclean to you to someone else in a, uh, that doesn't partake of the Most High's commandments. All right. So if it dies of itself and you touch the carcass, then it's unclean. Not if you slaughter it or it's properly slaughtered and then you eat a clean animal. It does not make you unclean in any way. All right. Verse 41.
Every creature that moves along the ground is detestable. It must not be eaten. Do not eat any creature that moves along the ground, whether it crawls on its belly or walks on 4 or more feet, for such creatures are detestable. Do not defile yourselves by any crawling creature. Do not become unclean or defiled by them. For I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, because I am holy. You must not defile yourselves by any creature that crawls along the ground. For I am the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt, so that I would be your God. Therefore be holy, because I am holy. This is the law regarding animals, birds, all living creatures that move in the water, and all creatures that crawl along the ground. You must distinguish between the unclean and the clean, between animals that may be eaten and those that may not.
So you'll have those that will say, we don't have to keep the food law no more. And one of the reasons outside of just throwing away the entire New Old Testament is that they'll say, well, the Levitical priesthood is no longer here. And I'm like, okay, what does eating clean have to do with the priesthood? And they'll be like, well, it's written in the book of Leviticus. And this book is obviously for the Levites. Okay. But understand why it's written in the book of Leviticus. It's not like it's written only for the Levites or it's directly connected to being a priest. This is for all his people, right? Do not defile yourselves by any crawling creature. Do not become unclean or defiled by them. For I am the Most High your Elohim. So consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy because I am holy. You must not defile yourselves by any creature that crawls along the ground. I am the Adon who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So I would be your Elohim. Therefore, be holy because I am holy. This is talking about a people, not a priesthood. So the whole point I'm getting to is that it's written in the book of Leviticus because of what was stated before. Leviticus 10 through 11. The Levites are the leaders that are to distinguish between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean. And you, this is the teachers of the land, the priests, are to teach the people of Israel all the statutes that the Most High has spoken to them by Moses. That's why it's written in the book of Leviticus. It's not written in the book of Leviticus because it's only for the Levites or it's only for the Levitical priesthood. It was written so the priests could decipher the clean and the unclean for the people. It was always for the people. They just taught it. The Levites were the teachers and those that honestly upheld the law. So, all that being said, final conclusion on the food law. Once again, BecomeSetApart.com has these lists, and you can watch the video on my YouTube. And that is chapter 11. All right. Purification after childbirth. Very short and sweet chapter, only 8 verses.
Leviticus 12. Then the Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, a woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will be unclean for 7 days, as she is during the days of her menstruation. And on the 8th day, the flesh of the boy's foreskin is to be circumcised. The woman shall continue in purification from her bleeding for 33 days. She must not touch anything sacred or go into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are complete. If, however, she gives birth to a daughter, The woman will be unclean for 2 weeks, as she is during her menstruation. Then she must continue in purification from her bleeding for 66 days. When the days of her purification are complete, whether for a son or for a daughter, she is to bring to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting a year-old lamb for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. And the priest will present them before the Lord, and make atonement for her. And she shall be ceremonially cleansed from her flow of blood. This is the law for a woman giving birth, whether to a male or to a female. But if she cannot afford a lamb, she shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. Then the priest will make atonement for her, and she will be clean.
All right. So, this is just kind of putting together things that we've already been reading and building up with the book of Leviticus. We've touched on all the sacrifices. This is just one of the situations where a sacrifice needs to occur. After the purification of childbirth, there is a time frame that I'm going to give a visual. And we have, after bearing a son, you're unclean 7 days and then 33 days afterwards, which is 40 total days. And then we saw the sacrifices. And then for a daughter, the unclean 14 days and then 66. So it's double both ways, double and double, which will be 80 days. So we have unclean 7 days for 33, and then 33 for 40, and then unclean 14 days, and then 66 for 80s for daughters. And then we see, which, like I said, we read in the beginning of Leviticus, that we have the sacrifices, and then we have the sacrifice substitutes if you are not able to afford a lamb, which can be 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons here. And that brings us to Luke chapter 2, 22 through 24. And when the time came for their purification that we're reading about in the law, according to the law of Moses, they brought him up to Jerusalem. This is talking about Mashiach, of course. We're in the New Testament, Luke, to present him to the Adon, as it is written in the law of the Adon. Every male who first opens the womb shall be called holy to the Adon, and to offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the law of the Adon, a pair of 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. So this also shows the class of I guess riches of Sarah and Joseph, that they wasn't wealthy, because the pair of 2 turtle doves or young pigeons were only if you could not afford a lamb. So that goes to show that Mashiach was not born in a wealthy family. And then also Leviticus 5:7, just the reference of the sacrifice. You cannot afford a lamb. Compensation for the sin offering, 2 turtle doves, 2 young pigeons. There's our reference in the sacrifices. And that is the conclusion of chapter 12, the laws of the purification after childbirth. Asking, I see, why is it double for daughters? And I looked into this. I don't have like definitive answer, or I would have put some scripture on here. Is really just like theories. and ideas. And of course, it's the theory. I think someone stated it. Yeah, has to do with Eve. Eve initiating the original sin is where my money is on. But like I said, it doesn't. There's not really scripture that just clearly gives us the answer. So that's why I didn't really speak on it. All right. Law about skin diseases. We'll see. We're reading from the Berean. We're reading from the Berean Standard Bible on this side, and in this translation, it doesn't use the word leprosy at all. So when it talks about the skin disease, a lot of it is talking about the plague of leprosy. All right, all right. Let's begin.
Leviticus 13. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when someone has a swelling or rash or bright spot on his skin that could become an infectious skin disease, he must be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons who is a priest.
So a lot of this, guys, I'm very big on visuals, but we just going to be reading these descriptions. You can do your own research with the descriptions we're reading on. We're not looking at, we're not getting visuals for this. So a lot of this, we're just going to take in, we're going to add maybe, discuss a couple of them, but it's going to just be what it is in this chapter.
The priest is to examine the infection on his skin, and if the hair in the infection has turned white and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin, it is a skin disease. After the priest examines him, he must pronounce him unclean. If, however, the spot on his skin is white and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and the hair in it has not turned white, the priest shall isolate the infected person for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to re-examine him, and if he sees that the infection is unchanged and has not spread on the skin, the priest must isolate him for another 7 days. The priest will examine him again on the 7th day, and if the sore has faded and has not spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is a rash. The person must wash his clothes and be clean. But if the rash spreads further on his skin after he has shown himself to the priest for his cleansing, he must present himself again to the priest. The priest will re-examine him, and if the rash has spread on the skin, the priest must pronounce him unclean. He has a skin disease.
And I mean, this logic is still relevant till this day, when people are in quarantine and when people are dealing with certain spreadable diseases, they are told to separate themselves. And this is what we're seeing with the Most High. Verse 9.
When anyone develops a skin disease, he must be brought to the priest. The priest will examine him, and if there is a white swelling on the skin that has turned the hair white, and there is raw flesh in the swelling, it is a chronic skin disease, and the priest must pronounce him unclean. He need not isolate him, for he is unclean. But if the skin disease breaks out all over his skin, so that it covers all the skin of the infected person from head to foot, as far as the priest can see, the priest shall examine him, and if the disease has covered his entire body, he is to pronounce the infected person clean.
All right. So, interesting portion of this chapter here, verse 12 and 13. If the skin disease breaks out over his entire skin, head to foot, the priest shall examine, and if the disease covers his entire body, he is pronounced to pronounce the infected person clean, since it has all turned white. He is clean. A lot of things that we can reference to nowadays. And just as a reference to it is white, to that this is leprous, we see that this was clearly a sign of being a leopard in Exodus 4:6 with Moses, when the Most High told him to put your hand inside your cloak, and he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. And a lot of these unclean skin diseases are centered around a sign of whiteness upon the flesh, in the hairs, it rooted in the skin. But specifically right now that it says if the entire body is leprous like snow, then they are to be clean. He is clean. And this, let me say, do not catch your feelings. Do not get your feelings hurt if you know someone or you have what this is called albinism. This is just a reference that matches up with the description. Is a group of disorders passed down in families where the body makes little or none of the substance called melanin. And then we see things such as not only is, as it says, this African boy, which most likely he's in a family of people of colored skin, but his skin does not produce any melanin. And then we see the other things that go with being albino is the hair in the eyes, and just reading ahead so we can read it all together now. In this same chapter, one of the descriptions of this skin disease that they call leopards is gold to blonde hair. We see that in verse 29 and 30 of this chapter. Excuse me. If a man or woman has an infection on the head or chin, so your beard or hair, excuse me, the hair in it is yellow and thin. That is a part of the leopard's skin disease, and the hair will be yellow, as shown here. White or blonde to yellow hair. So, just saying that they are still pronounced clean, but it's just interesting that albinism comes with disorders for the body. So your body is more prone to skin diseases, skin cancer. Your eyesight isn't as good. And I'm just going to say it straightforward. Like I said, I don't say this to offend anyone, but it sounds like a curse, a generational curse, because it comes with disorders for the body. Just saying, it is what it is. I think this is the modern day representation of what we're reading about in verses, what we just read, 12 and 13. Okay. All right. That was 12 and 13. All right. Verse 14 now.
Since it has all turned white, he is clean. But whenever raw flesh appears on someone, he will be unclean. When the priest sees the raw flesh, he must pronounce him unclean. The raw flesh is unclean. It is a skin disease. But if the raw flesh changes and turns white, he must go to the priest. The priest will re-examine him, and if the infection has turned white, the priest is to pronounce the infected person clean. Then he is clean. When a boil appears on someone's skin and it heals, and a white swelling or a reddish-white spot develops where the boil was, he must present himself to the priest. The priest shall examine it, and if it appears to be beneath the skin, and the hair in it has turned white, The priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a diseased infection that has broken out in the boil.
So just making the point, like I said, we're not trying to figure out what all these look like. I feel like a lot of these still relevant today. As we were just, comparing the albino and reference, but a lot of the key points is the white in the skin, a white in the swelling, white hairs turned from it is just a major key description, visual to a lot of the beginning of the sign of something being unclean. All right, verse 21.
But when the priest examines it, if there is no white hair in it, and it is not beneath the skin and has faded, the priest shall isolate him for 7 days. If it spreads any further on the skin, the priest must pronounce him unclean. It is an infection. But if the spot remains unchanged and does not spread, it is only the scar from the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. When there is a burn on someone's skin, and the raw area of the burn becomes reddish white or white, the priest must examine it. If the hair in the spot has turned white, and the spot appears to be deeper than the skin, it is a disease that has broken out in the burn. The priest must pronounce him unclean. It is a diseased infection. But if the priest examines it, and there is no white hair in the spot, and it is not beneath the skin but has faded, the priest shall isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to re-examine him, and if it has spread further on the skin, the priest must pronounce him unclean. It is a diseased infection. But if the spot is unchanged and has not spread on the skin but has faded, it is a swelling from the burn, and the priest is to pronounce him clean, for it is only the scar from the burn. If a man or woman has an infection on the head or chin, the priest shall examine the infection, and if it appears to be deeper than the skin, and the hair in it is yellow and thin, the priest must pronounce him unclean. It is a scaly outbreak, an infectious disease of the head or chin. But if the priest examines the scaly infection, and it does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, the priest shall isolate the infected person for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to re-examine the infection, and if the scaly outbreak has not spread, and there is no yellow hair in it, and it does not appear to be deeper than the skin, then the person must shave himself except for the scaly area. Then the priest shall isolate him for another 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the scaly outbreak, and if it is not spread on the skin and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, the priest is to pronounce him clean. He must wash his clothes, and he will be clean.
And just with the same logic about the food law, like just because the idea of the Levitical priesthood is no longer established, doesn't mean people ain't out here getting skin diseases and all of these plagues, right? This ain't stopping. Because there's quite a few of these that you can, if you really look into the description, there are diseases that match up with, and like I said, nasty looking pictures that you can match up a lot of what we're reading about that's still plaguing people's skin.
However, the scaly outbreak spreads further on the skin after his cleansing. The priest is to examine him. And if the scaly outbreak has spread on the skin, the priest need not look for yellow hair. The person is unclean. If, however, in his sight the scaly outbreak is unchanged, and black hair has grown in it, then it has healed. He is clean, and the priest is to pronounce him clean. When a man or a woman has white spots on the skin, the priest shall examine them, and if the spots are dull white, it is a harmless rash that has broken out on the skin. The person is clean. Now, if a man loses his hair and is bald, he is still clean. Or if his hairline recedes and he is bald on his forehead, he is still clean. But if there is a reddish white sore on the bald head or forehead, it is an infectious disease breaking out on it. The priest is to examine him, And if the swelling of the infection on his bald head or forehead is reddish white like a skin disease, the man is diseased. He is unclean. The priest must pronounce him unclean because of the infection on his head. A diseased person must wear torn clothes and let his hair hang loose, and he must cover his mouth and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." As long as he has the infection, he remains unclean. He must live alone in a place outside the camp.
Verse 45, 46. A diseased person must wear torn clothes and let his hair hang loose. What's this say? Or uncover his head. He must cover his mouth and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." The Most High not only created a separation, as we read verse 46, as long as he has the infection, he needs to remain outside of the camp. So the Most High creates division, and he made it visually obvious who was unclean. I just thought it was very interesting how he was like, look the part, wear certain clothing, take off your headgear, and when you talk, just like now, like cover your mouth, you're unclean. You're unclean. Cover your mouth and leave the camp. Just thought it was interesting how he made it so visual. So there was no mistaking who was clean and unclean. So people would stay away from them. Now we're talking about laws. They call it mildew. This is leprosy of clothing, on clothings and fabrics, is what we're going to read from verse 47 through 59.
If any fabric is contaminated with mildew, any wool or linen garment, any weave or knit of linen or wool, or any article of leather, and if the mark in the fabric, leather, weave, knit, or leather article is green or red, then it is contaminated with mildew and must be shown to the priest.
So real quick, just showing a different translation. And it says mildew, and this talks about the different translations, but a plague of leprosy in a garment is another translation. Leprosy in a garment, which we're going to call mildew. And before I even continue, it says leather in leather or garments if it is green or red. So I did have some pictures for this though. We're looking, identifying mold or mildew. We see that both can be greenish red, because right now we're reading the garments, but next chapter we're going to be reading about it being in the home. So we're going to read about the mildew and mold in a home as well. And so this is just giving a visual of that greenish red look. Same thing on food, right? When things are molded, you get the white and green type look.
The priest is to examine the mildew and isolate the contaminated fabric for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall re-examine it, and if the mildew has spread in the fabric, weave, knit, or leather, then regardless of how it is used, it is a harmful mildew. The article is unclean. He is to burn the fabric, weave, or knit, whether the contaminated item is wool or linen or leather. Since the mildew is harmful, the article must be burned up. But when the priest re-examines it, if the mildew has not spread in the fabric, weave, knit, or leather article, the priest is to order the contaminated article to be washed and isolated for another 7 days. After it has been washed, the priest is to re-examine it, and if the mildewed article has not changed in appearance, it is unclean. Even though the mildew has not spread, you must burn it, whether the rot is on the front or back.
So if it ain't going away, it needs to get burned. And before I continue, verse 52 here, since the mildew is harmful, and that's a real thing, right? Mold or mildew on fabrics in your home. Over 200 types of toxic mold have been identified in homes with moisture issues. It says 24 to 40 hours is all it takes for toxic black mold to begin colonizing in your home. It's affected those that breathe it in with asthma. And so, yes, the idea of this leprets of reddish green mold or mildew is harmful.
If the priest examines it and the mildew has faded after it has been washed, he must cut the contaminated section out of the fabric, leather, weave, or knit. But if it reappears in the fabric, weave, or knit, or on any leather article, it is spreading. You must burn the contaminated article. If the mildew disappears from the fabric, weave, or knit, or any leather article after washing, then it is to be washed again, and it will be clean. This is the law concerning a mildew contamination in wool or linen fabric, weave or knit, or any leather article, for pronouncing it clean or unclean.
Oh, yeah. So this portion is not just animals, but clean, unclean, from your garments, your home, to what you eat. All right, chapter 14.
Leviticus 14. Then the Lord said to Moses, "This is the law for the one afflicted with a skin disease on the day of his cleansing, when he is brought to the priest. The priest is to go outside the camp to examine him, and if the skin disease of the afflicted person has healed, the priest shall order that 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop be brought for the one to be cleansed. Then the priest shall command that one of the birds be slaughtered over fresh water in a clay pot, and he is to take the live bird, together with the cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop, and dip them into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the fresh water. 7 times he shall sprinkle the one to be cleansed of the skin disease. Then he shall pronounce him clean, and release the live bird into the open field. The one being cleansed must wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, and bathe with water. Then he will be ceremonially clean. Afterward, he may enter the camp, but he must remain outside his tent for 7 days. On the 7th day, he must shave off all his hair, his head, his beard, his eyebrows, and the rest of his hair. He must wash his clothes and bathe himself with water, and he will be clean.
Shoot, just having to do all of that would make me make sure that I'm never going to be unclean. The fact that you have to go be isolated outside the camp, and then once you're in the camp, it tells you to stay outside of your tent for 7 more days. And then after that, you have to go shave your whole body. And then after that, you got to go make sacrifices. Oh my goodness. I'll be on it. I'll be like, do not make me unclean. Do not put me through all of that.
On the 8th day, he is to bring 2 unblemished male lambs, an unblemished ewe lamb, a year old, a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with olive oil, and 1 log of olive oil. The priest who performs the cleansing shall present the one to be cleansed, together with these offerings, before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then the priest is to take one of the male lambs and present it as a guilt offering, along with the log of olive oil, and he must wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he is to slaughter the lamb in the sanctuary area where the sin offering and burnt offering are slaughtered. Like the sin offering, the guilt offering belongs to the priest. It is most holy. The priest is to take some of the blood from the guilt offering and put it on the right earlobe of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot.
All right, quick pause here. So we see this cleaning ritual with the blood that shall be put on the right earlobe, the right thumb, and then the right big toe. We see this, or we saw this, with the cleansing and the initiation of the priesthood, Exodus 29:20. And you shall kill the ram and take part of his blood and put it on the tip of the right ear of Aaron, and on the tips of the right ears of his sons, and on the thumbs of the right hands, and on the great toe of their right feet. So what we're reading is simply that. It's the same cleansing ritual that those that go from unclean to clean, that the priest had to do to go from an unclean to a clean priest. So seems very consistent that this was a ritual to have someone go through and from unclean to clean, simply put. Verse 15.
And the priest shall take some of the log of olive oil, pour it into his left palm, dip his right forefinger into the oil in his left palm, and sprinkle some of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. And the priest is to put some of the oil remaining in his palm on the right earlobe of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on top of the blood of the guilt offering. The rest of the oil in his palm the priest is to put on the head of the one to be cleansed, to make atonement for him before the Lord. Then the priest is to sacrifice the sin offering, and make atonement for the one to be cleansed from his uncleanness. After that, the priest shall slaughter the burnt offering, and offer it on the altar with the grain offering, to make atonement for him, and he will be clean. If, however, the person is poor, and cannot afford these offerings, he is to take 1 male lamb as a guilt offering to be waved to make atonement for him, along with 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with olive oil for a grain offering, a log of olive oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, whichever he can afford, one to be a sin offering and the other a burnt offering. On the 8th day, he is to bring them for his cleansing to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting before the Lord. The priest shall take the lamb for the guilt offering along with the log of olive oil and wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. And after he slaughters the lamb for the guilt offering, the priest is to take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the right earlobe of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Then the priest is to pour some of the oil into his left palm, and sprinkle with his right forefinger some of the oil in his left palm 7 times before the Lord. The priest shall also put some of the oil in his palm on the right earlobe of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the same places as the blood of the guilt offering. The rest of the oil in his palm the priest is to put on the head of the one to be cleansed, to make atonement for him before the Lord. Then he must sacrifice the turtle doves or young pigeons, whichever he can afford, one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, together with the grain offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement before the Lord for the one to be cleansed. This is the law for someone who has a skin disease and cannot afford the cost of his cleansing.
All right, so verse 1 through 32 of chapter 14 is the ritual to be cleansed from being unclean, from any type of what we just got done reading, skin disease of any sort. All right, so now this is the mildew, leprous, harmful mold within a home, and what you need to do to make it clean or if it is unclean forever. Verse 33.
Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when you enter the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as your possession, and I put a contamination of mildew into a house in that land, the owner of the house shall come and tell the priest, something like mildew has appeared in my house. The priest must order that the house be cleared before he enters it to examine the mildew.
Once again, just showing in different translations. Let's do 35. We see over here, I put the plague of leprosy in a house of the land of your possession. So just different translation. They call it mildew, leprous, plague. Same thing.
So that nothing in the house will become unclean. After this, the priest shall go in to inspect the house. He is to examine the house, and if the mildew on the walls consists of green or red depressions that appear to be beneath the surface of the wall, the priest shall go outside the doorway of the house and close it up for 7 days.
He's like, straight up leave. So that reddish green or red depressions that appear to be beneath the surface of the wall. So it's thick. It's like in the wall.
On the 7th day, the priest is to return and inspect the house. If the mildew has spread on the walls, he must order that the contaminated stones be pulled out and thrown into an unclean place outside the city. And he shall have the inside of the house scraped completely, and the plaster that is scraped off dumped into an unclean place outside the city. So different stones must be obtained to replace the contaminated ones, as well as additional mortar to replaster the house. If the mildew reappears in the house after the stones have been torn out and the house has been scraped and replastered, the priest must come and inspect it. If the mildew has spread in the house, it is a destructive mildew. The house is unclean. It must be torn down, with its stones, its timbers, and all its plaster, and taken outside the city to an unclean place. Anyone who enters the house during any of the days that it is closed up will be unclean until evening. And anyone who sleeps in the house or eats in it must wash his clothes. If, however, the priest comes and inspects it, and the mildew has not spread after the house has been replastered, he shall pronounce the house clean, because the mildew is gone. He is to take 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop, to purify the house. And he shall slaughter one of the birds over fresh water in a clay pot. Then he shall take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet yarn, and the live bird, dip them in the blood of the slaughtered bird and the fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. And he shall cleanse the house with the bird's blood, the fresh water, the live bird, the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the scarlet yarn. Finally, he is to release the live bird into the open fields outside the city. In this way, he will make atonement for the house, and it will be clean. This is the law for any infectious skin disease, or a scaly outbreak, for mildew in clothing or in a house, and for a swelling, rash, or spot, to determine when something is clean or unclean. This is the law regarding skin diseases and mildew.
All right. Pretty straightforward stuff. Talks about, if it's spreading, then it's an issue. If it's cleansed or taken away and it doesn't spread, then you're good. A lot of these rules, do stand firm with how we deal with the type of mold and mildew as well. That is unhealthy. That if it's spreading, it is an issue. Et cetera with it, right? You get as much detail as you want if you want to get into individual studies on the matter. And this is Leviticus 14. Now we're getting into 15, the last chapter of this portion. The uncleanness of men. So just different unclean things that will come forth from the body in this chapter.
Leviticus 15. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Say to the Israelites, when any man has a bodily discharge, the discharge is unclean. This uncleanness is from his discharge, whether his body allows the discharge to flow or blocks it. So his discharge will bring about uncleanness."
So this is talking about like an unnatural discharge from the body. And the Septuagint, well, let's read the Targums. I have the Targums, Onkelos, verse 2 and 3 of chapter 15. And say to them, should discharge flow from the body of any man, because of his discharge he is impure. This is the law of his impurity. When his discharge flows, his flesh drips with his discharge, or his flesh is stopped up by his discharge. It causes him to become impure. Just the way it was written, just wanted to read it differently there. And then now in the Septuagint, it gives an example of an unclean, unpure discharge. Verse 3, and this is the law of his uncleanness. Whoever has gonorrhea out of his body. And then, like I said, with the skin diseases, I'm not showing images to this nasty looking stuff. You can do that on your own time. But you can look up gonorrhea discharge. Look it up. And this is the idea of what it's talking about. A bodily discharge that's not natural, that is unpure, and you got a situation at hand. So that is what's being spoken of. And this is at least an example of that. Continuing verse 4 now.
Any bed on which the man with the discharge lies will be unclean, and any furniture on which he sits will be unclean. Anyone who touches his bed must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Whoever sits on furniture on which the man with the discharge was sitting must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Whoever touches the body of the man with the discharge must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. If the man with the discharge spits on one who is clean, that person must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Any saddle on which the man with the discharge rides will be unclean. Whoever touches anything that was under him will be unclean until evening, and whoever carries such things must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. If the man with the discharge touches anyone without first rinsing his hands with water, the one who was touched must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Any clay pot that the man with the discharge touches must be broken, and any wooden utensil must be rinsed with water.
So now we're going to get into the cleansing part of what this discharge would make you unclean. Now let's get into the cleanse.
When the man has been cleansed from his discharge, he must count off 7 days for his cleansing, wash his clothes, and bathe himself in fresh water, and he shall be clean. On the 8th day, he is to take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, come before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and give them to the priest. The priest is to sacrifice them, one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for the man before the Lord because of his discharge.
All right, so now separation now from what we just read. So this is, and even it's creating separation, because this is a STD, right? It can be transmitted disease, which is what the Most High is straight up in the ancient times is saying, hey, don't touch that. You can get this disease from this person. And that's why he's saying if you're touching anything that he's touching, you're unclean. Wash yourself. Make sure you practice good hygiene because you touch somebody that is unclean that can give you something that he has, right? And then now, totally separate, verse 16 through 18 is talking about a different type of discharge from a man.
When a man has an emission of semen, he must bathe his whole body with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Any clothing or leather on which there is an emission of semen must be washed with water, and it will remain unclean until evening. If a man lies with a woman and there is an emission of semen, both must bathe with water, and they will remain unclean until evening.
So we're reading about just how important being clean and being holy is to the Most High. And this is why one of the rules of the Sabbath day is no sex, where an emission of semen occurs. As it says here, if a man lies with a woman and there is an emission of semen, both must bathe with water and they will remain unclean until evening. I don't know about y'all, but doing an act that makes you unclean on a holy day contradicts scripture. We may not have a chapter and verse that says, thou shalt not lie with your wife on the Sabbath. Doesn't mean we can't find it in the context here. And we see it all throughout the Bible, actually, that on holy days, men were commanded to stay away from their wives. Deuteronomy 23, 10 and 11. If any man among you becomes unclean because of nocturnal emission, then he shall go outside of the camp. He shall not come inside the camp. But when evening comes, he shall bathe himself in water, and as the sun set, he may come inside the camp. A separation. Exodus 19:15. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman, meaning lie with your wives on the third day, which was in the context of Exodus 19, it was about to be a feast day of Shavuot, where the Ten Commandments was handed. Continuing, 1 Samuel 21:5, for David to be able to get the holy showbread, he needed to be clean enough to partake of the holy bread. And so David answered the priest, saying, truly, women have been kept from us as always when I go on an expedition. So if he was lying with women, he would be unclean and he wouldn't be able to eat of the holy bread. And then just even in the context of Mashiach's birth, Matthew 1:25, but knew her not. So Joseph did not know his wife Mary until she had given birth to a son, which was Mashiach. So in other words, Mary was not unclean through the act of sex the entire birth of Mashiach. By no coincidence. You think it was a coincidence or there's no reason why they told us that? It's about remain clean and holy. Even if you have a dream, if there is a mission of semen, then it is what it is. All right. So 16 through 18, totally different from this type of discharge. This is talking about pretty much sex or any type of act that would cause an emission of semen. Still unclean, but you're just unclean until evening and bathe yourself, and that's it. And don't do it during holy days, holy events, right? All right. Closing this chapter now, 19. Uncleanness of women.
When a woman has a discharge consisting of blood from her body, she will be unclean due to her menstruation for 7 days, and anyone who touches her will be unclean until evening. Anything on which she lies or sits during her menstruation will be unclean, and anyone who touches her bed must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Whoever touches any furniture on which she was sitting must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. And whether it is a bed or furniture on which she was sitting, whoever touches it will be unclean until evening. If a man lies with her and her menstrual flow touches him, he will be unclean for 7 days, and any bed on which he lies will become unclean. When a woman has a discharge of her blood for many days at a time other than her menstrual period, or if it continues beyond her period, she will be unclean all the days of her unclean discharge, just as she is during the days of her menstruation. Any bed on which she lies or any furniture on which she sits during the days of her discharge will be unclean, like her bed during her menstrual period. Anyone who touches these things will be unclean. He must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. When a woman is cleansed of her discharge.
1 second. I actually didn't write this note, but let me find the verse real quick. 1 second, because I wanted to make a point here that just reminded for verse 24 specifically. 1 second. Okay. Yes, I'm going to read this out loud. Let me write this note here first. So for verse 24, I'm reading Leviticus 18:19. And you know what? I'll even add it on here. All right, so real quick, verse 24 in Leviticus 15 reads, if a man lies with her and her menstrual flow touches him, he will be unclean for 7 days. Any bed on which he lies will be unclean, become unclean. And I have to say this. We're a big boy, big girl fellowship, right? We can talk about mature things. Nothing's off limits if the word is talking about it. I have people saying, oh, well, what's stopping me from still doing the deed when my wife is on her cycle? Because they'll say, oh, okay, I'm unclean. So what, right? I want to read this connected verse with this, that it's just not just unclean. You're going against the commandment if you are thorough. Leviticus 18:19. If you don't know she's on her menstrual flow. But if you know she's on her menstrual cycle, there's a commandment that says you shall not approach a woman to uncover her nakedness while she is in her menstrual uncleanness. This is why we have to read the entire book and take our notes, because it's not as simple as, oh, I'm unclean. It's actually against a commandment that it straight up says don't do it. Just wanted to add that there. Very big deal. Because I know some people don't care. But Most High said no. All right. So anything that touches a woman in her blood, discharge of blood is unclean, period. 7 days. All right. The cleansing.
She must count off 7 days, and after that she will be ceremonially clean. On the 8th day, she is to take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons and bring them to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The priest is to sacrifice one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for her before the Lord for her unclean discharge. You must keep the children of Israel separate from their uncleanness, so that they do not die by defiling my tabernacle, which is among them.
And boom, verse 31 is a key verse. I get so many questions about modern day time, about what if I'm unclean, can I still partake of the Sabbath day? There's no chapter or verse saying you can't partake of anything except the Passover meal. Okay? If anything, they give specific rules for the Passover meal. If you have touched a dead body or you are off on a journey, it doesn't say anything about this other uncleanliness. You just probably still had to be like separate out the camp if you were, because a lot of these things you would be clean at evening, which I have gone over before about the structure of Passover meal, how the Passover meal isn't until evening. So the majority of these acts actually will make you clean by evening anyway. And also the question on what stipulations of that affects your life if you're unclean, and not much anymore. To be brutally honest, it's not much, because the whole structure of the tabernacle was this. So the whole reason of separating yourself and going outside of the camp was so that they do not die by defiling my tabernacle, which is among them. They were living amongst the Most High. They were in close quarters with those that went to and fro from the tabernacle, the priest, and those that went to give sacrifices. So if someone was unclean, they had to separate themselves so they wouldn't defile the tabernacle. Nowadays, we don't have that. We don't have a tabernacle. There's the world is defiled. There is nothing that doesn't practice like true cleanliness anywhere that we live, especially according to the book that we're reading. So that being said, I want to read a couple of more verses on that point. Deuteronomy 23:14. Because the Most High your Elohim walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and to give up your enemies before you. Therefore, your camp must be holy. So, yes, do we want to try to stay clean as we can for holy days? Yes. Do we want to not partake of unclean food? Of course, we don't want to put something unclean in us. We don't want to defile anything that is holy. But are we in a land where we have to watch out that the camp has to be holy? So these stipulations someone has to be outside the camp. I say this because, for example, I know that there are extremists and they would put their wife outside of their home or in a different location, but the whole point was to keep what was together holy so you don't offend the Most High by making something unclean where his presence is dwelling. You separating your wife from you, even on her cycle, there's nothing that you're separating her from, in other words. You're not meeting with the Most High's priest. There is no tabernacle that you have to keep separate. And honestly, even your home probably is unclean due to the uncleanliness of people that you're bringing home from work, from the store, etc. So I'm just making the point that the separation was because the Most High was in the camp. So the camp had to stay holy. That separation doesn't exist anymore. We're not in a camp where the Most High dwells physically anymore. So that he may not see any indecent among you and turn away from you. In Numbers 19:13, whoever touches a dead person, the body of anyone who has died, and does not cleanse himself, defiles the tabernacle of the Most High. See, so if you're unclean and you defile the tabernacle, that person shall be cut off, because the water for impurity was not thrown on him. He shall be unclean. So the whole reason of cleansing yourself is this for that time. If we're talking about touching physical things, like I said, we're not talking about spiritual matters as taken by keeping the most high days holy, spiritual, and keeping our temples holy, spiritual. We're if touching and things and all of that is physical stuff. It's just different nowadays. It's just different. All right, finishing off chapter 15.
The law of him who has a discharge, of the man who has an emission of semen, whereby he is unclean, of a woman in her menstrual period, of any male or female who has a discharge, and of a man who lies with an unclean woman.
And that is the conclusion of the clean and unclean portion of Leviticus chapter 11 through 15. Next week, we're starting off on Leviticus 16, which is the infamous scapegoat Day of Atonement chapter. It's got some good stuff in the book of Leviticus. We'll keep it rolling. Thank y'all for joining me. Shabbat Shalom once again. May Abba barak each and every one of you for seeking understanding of his living word. Shalom.